Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Beyond Compliance for July 2020. My name is Aaron Bolshaw, the VP of Marketing for SafetyChain and the moderator for Beyond Compliance. For those of you joining us first time, Beyond Compliance is an ongoing monthly industry update for food and beverage and CPG facility operators. QA, safety, compliance professionals all join us, and we partner with thought leaders across different sectors, from labs to equipment manufacturers, to consultants, and many, many more. Our goal is to bring you insights around the market that shape the way we grow our businesses, deliver quality products to customers, and safeguard our brands. SafetyChain sponsors the webinar series, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that here, if we go one slide forward, SafetyChain is the #1 plant management platform that improves yield, maximizes productivity, and ensures compliance for food and beverage manufacturers. Trusted by over 1,500 facilities, SafetyChain is the only complete solution for production, so that's your OEE and SPC side of the house, food safety and quality, which is what we're most known for, that QMS side, and also supplier compliance. Today we are scheduled for an hour. We've got a ton of great content to go through, and I have to say very timely as well. Before we get into that, before we get to some introductions, I do want to cover a couple of things. First, everyone is on mute. Ironically, we do want to hear from you though. So if you would, please submit your questions as you have them through the presentation using the console on your right. And we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the program. I think we're going to have a lot of good stuff to go through, and some questions are going to pop up. So also, if anyone is having audio issues right now, first thing to do is try to call in using a phone. That often resolves that issue, okay? And of course, everyone's favorite question, yes, you will absolutely get a link to this recording and the slides to share, to cherish, to study. There's no quiz, don't worry about that. And with that, if you go one more slide, I would like to introduce a couple of very esteemed colleagues. First, Lone Jespersen is the founder and principal at Cultivate. Dr. Jespersen works there, has for a while, and it's an organization dedicated to helping food manufacturers globally make safe, great tasting food through cultural effectiveness. She holds a master's in mechanical engineering, a master's in food science, and a Ph.D. in culture-enabled food safety. So perfect for today. And she also served as the chair of the food safety culture for GFSI technical working group that was dedicated to characterizing and quantifying food safety culture across the globe, the global food industry, from farm to fork. Amazing to have you, Lone. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Looking forward to it.
Yes, yes. And then virtually sitting to your left, or as we're seeing it, to your right, is Laura Dunn Nelson. Laura's the VP of Business Development at Intertek Alchemy. Laura brings with her over 30 years of experience implementing food safety and quality programs for processing, for packaging, food service, retail operations, the whole scope, right? And she's worked with global retailers and manufacturers in the implementation of their food and workplace safety programs. Holds a degree in microbiology. Pleased to have you here, Laura. Very nice to meet your acquaintance. And will you start us out just a minute, Laura, by telling us a little bit about Intertek Alchemy?
Sure, Aaron, and thanks to you, Ann and Lone, for this opportunity to share some things today. So Intertek Alchemy is a unique company. We're made up of technology gurus, adult learning specialists, and industry experts, and we pull all of that together to develop and deliver solutions to help customers train, reinforce, and ensure compliance for their workforce. And so really, we really focus on how we can align behaviors, including those around food safety, workplace safety, and operational excellence. So we serve over, well over 2 million workers monthly, and we're in over 15,000 locations around the world. So that's a little about us.
Fantastic. Yeah. So perfect timing, because I kind of think of it as Intertek Alchemy is sort of where the rubber hits the road a lot of the times with many of these programs. So both of you, just to open this up and kind of segue us into what we're talking about, the US FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn announced just a couple days ago the release of its new era of smarter food safety blueprint. I'm not kidding when I say this is not planned. We've been planning this webinar for some time, so the timing was very interesting to say the least. But I don't think that this comes as a surprise to us that one of the 4 stated core goals is to foster the development of stronger food safety cultures. So this is perfect timing. Lone, why don't you take us through what we're going to cover today and just jump right in, okay?
Super. Thank you so much, Aaron. And also thank you to Anne from SafetyChain for organizing our webinar today. As Aaron just said, this is something that's been in the work for some time. And I'm just really pleased to have another opportunity to share a couple of thoughts with the SafetyChain followers here. So thank you so much. And thank you to Laura Nelson for also jumping in and co-delivering this. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about anchors and food safety. I'll describe what that is in just a second. We're also going to just dive into a little bit more detail around how to create change, and there's a couple of industry cases that we want to share there. Then Laura's going to take us really deep into the people dimension. And for those of you that are familiar with the GFSI work that we've completed, you'll know that we have the 5 dimensions, and Laura was the leader on the people dimension, so she's just spot on and the right person for taking us into detail with that. And then we're going to just give you a couple of actions that you can take now to create change within your organizations. So with that, I'd be in very big trouble if I didn't just give you a couple of words around who Cultivate is. So we are a Swiss-based organization that is really focused on working with food companies. We only do work in food, and it's about understanding and building proficiency with leaders and others in food companies around a culture of food safety. So what is it in your organizational culture that either helps or hinders your food safety performance? We do that through measuring, so we do a lot of assessments of cultures with companies, putting that number to it so that you have something to discuss and change, and also benchmark against others in the industry. And we have various different tools for that are listed here. And we also do a lot around change and sustaining change. It's great that we all know what food safety culture is. It's also very good that we know how to assess it, but if we do not include or implement change that's actually going to sustain some new behaviors, it's questionable why we've just done what we did. So that's who we are. These are some of our fabulous clients and partners. Really proud to have a great network that's global, with both practitioners in industry and also regulators across the world. So I mentioned anchoring. So anchoring is a psychological heuristic that really just cements in our brain. It cements the different ways of doing things without our brain having to think about what we do all the time. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We put on our pants one leg at a time, and when we do that, we don't necessarily think about that we now have to bend the toes on the right foot, lift the heel, and slowly remove the foot from the floor before we can then take and put on the right pant leg. That's anchoring. That's our brain has adopted this practice that we don't have to think about how we put on our pants every day. When we think about this psychological heuristic, or this shortcut that our brain is essentially taking, I want you to take that same thinking into what we do with food safety in food companies every day. Because when we talk about culture, when we talk about food safety, it has a lot to do with how we've now come to assume that this is the right thing to act, and our brain and our group thinking is taking some assumptions around what other people are doing or what we have to do, and sometimes we have to challenge those assumptions. So what I'm going to share with you today are a couple of cases where companies have taken a look at their current anchors around food safety They've decided where they want to lift, shift, and drop the anchors in a new place, and what they're doing to make sure that those around them that have to come with them in that change is actually going to do that willingly and with enthusiasm. Because anchors, when they go wrong, can create tragedies. We saw that in Maple Leaf. I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Maple Leaf for 11 years, and one of the best organizations that I believe is today in the food industry. In 2008, 23 people lost their lives because we had sent contaminated food into the marketplace, contaminated with Listeria monocytogenes, and 23 valuable consumers lost their life. When we did the deep dive, and CFIA and Public Health Canada did the public investigation, there were some clear signs on that this was not because we didn't have standards in place. It wasn't that we didn't have external audits. It wasn't that, it wasn't because inspectors didn't work with the plants and help us be compliant to regulations. It largely came down to some of these anchors around that food safety was something that was very technical, and we had some really good technical people, and as long as we had that, then it was good enough. So it was something in the organizational culture that had to be studied and also had to be changed. We had to look at these anchors, know where they were, and then decide how to lift, shift, and where to drop them so that others could come with us. With that in mind, I want to give you just a couple of further thoughts about what is a culture of food safety. And I know that this is a bit of a repetition for some of you who has probably heard these messages before, but it's one of these things I believe that we are very much as an industry trying to figure out what is a culture of food safety. Now we know what it is. Now we need to figure out how to create change and therefore link it to performance for food safety. And so many of our colleagues in the industry are doing some fantastic work in that space. As part of the GFSI technical working group, Laura, as I said, was part of that. We were charged with also coming up with a definition of what is a culture of food safety. And we came up with this. A company's food safety culture is the shared values, norms, and beliefs that affect mindsets and behaviors towards food safety in, across, and throughout the company. I want to just highlight a couple of words here and share some thoughts with you. It's about shared. So as Lone Jespersen, I don't have a culture. As soon as I become part of a group, so I'm Danish for heritage, we have a shared set of anchors, values, norms, and beliefs. It's in that sharing in the group that culture takes its shape. And therefore, it's also in that sharing in the group that we have the opportunity when new people join our organizations to onboard them into what we expect for food safety. What are those anchors that we'd like them to take on from the day that they set foot in the door with our teams? It's when that group comes together and shares these values, norms, and beliefs, they affect how we think about things. What's our mindset? They affect our behaviors as well. So we have to be able to tie the understanding of these current shared values, norms, and beliefs and the anchors so that we can better understand how we now potentially have to change them so that we can affect mindsets and behaviors. One of the things that's happening in the industry, aside from the what Aaron was mentioning with FDA announcing the fourth pillar being food safety culture in their recently, yesterday, I think you said, Aaron released new approach, is also that GFSI in February launched their GFSI benchmarking document 2020. In benchmarking 2020, there is now an inclusion of a clause that is called management commitment and food safety culture. So in FSM2, we now have specifically called out that all of the benchmark standards to the GFSI benchmarking document 2020 will have to include elements of food safety culture, at minimum around communication, training, feedback from employees, and performance measurement on food safety related activities. So now there's another incentive for all of us to engage those in our organizations, in and throughout the organization in food safety. And make sure that everybody understands how the way they talk, the way they're learning and they're training others, the way they enable others to provide feedback and our performance measures, how that will improve our food safety culture and how that is also going to help us in audit situations. But the fact is that both regulations and audit requirements are still incentives for change that keep us in those earlier stages of maturity. We're reacting to an external requirement. So I'd like to also just revisit the maturity model with you, because I believe that the maturity model is a way for us to drive conversations in food companies that gets us out of that we're reacting to external requirements and into some other stages where we're more planful internally and where we're driving food safety improvements through our culture because we control it. We're internally motivated as opposed to externally motivated, if you like. For those that are new to the model, I encourage you to go to the cultivatefoodsafety.com. We have a model that has a lot of detail on it that is behind this one I'm showing you right now, and you can grab it from our website. It's free, it's for everybody, and it's a good conversation starter with your teams. But let me just take you through the 5 stages. So stage 1, the green doubt stage, there is where the performance is the lowest. It's where, as I said before, food safety actions and behaviors are mostly motivated by external pressures. And it's one where we're not really seeing a significant improvement in performance. Then we get into stage 2, which is the light green react to stage. And we're starting to see some little improvements. They're a little up and down. They're not really sustained. They're not really embedded into what we do every day. What signifies stage 2 is that we have these strong technical teams. It's where we invest in and we have the right technical people in the roles and we're really relying on them. Unfortunately, when we go in and measure in stage 2 companies, we're also seeing evidence that food safety is not really in and throughout the company. It's mostly within the food safety department. It's when we get into a stage of where everybody knows more, stage 3, the blue one, that we're starting to hear from other functions, manufacturing, finance, procurement, product development, what their unique roles are in food safety. So the organizations in stage 3 have taken the time to engage others and saying, what do you think your role is in food safety? And let's talk together and get that formalized. Because what happens when you do that is, fortunately, we have a lot of people that are growing in our industry and therefore they move to new roles in other companies. If you have a company that's in a late stage 3, where people might be joining another company, so they're leaving their position, it's not really that big an impact on your food safety culture because a new person will be onboarded into these shared assumptions, into these anchors that are now solidly dropped around that food safety is unique to your role, and therefore we've taken the time to define it, and here it is, let's talk about it. In stage 4 and 5, food safety is included in what we do for business planning. Our strategies is where we have a lot of data, especially in stage 4, where we can start actually having predictive analysis on our performance as well. And stage 5 is where it's really just embedded as any other functions and any other activities that are important to the success of our business. I'll say in the almost 80 companies that we've measured in, we have not one single company or plant that is in stage 5. It's aspirational, but the important part here is that we move through these stages bite sizes at a time. Do not even think about moving from stage 2 to 4 in the course of a year. It does not work that way. You have to break down your change. You have to break it into some very simple actions, and Laura's going to talk much more about this, so that your entire organization can come with you, that they can take ownership, and that food safety can just become one of the key pillars that make your business successful. So I'm a big fan of cost of quality. I think cost of quality is one of these measures that, if you are in the higher stages, so 3, 4, and 5 of maturity, can really become a great measure for saying, this is how we're doing things today. They're not as effective or efficient as they could be. Now let's look at how we can improve on it. It's really important, though, that I think the most effective ways to, or times to use cost of quality is when you are in that starting stages of stage 3. Because if you're in stage 1 or 2, you don't have the knowledge network across your organization to actually look for improvements or look for risks and not make hard decisions to cut costs without it being solidly evaluated. So there's some caution that comes with cost of quality. Look for that you apply when you get into a stage where your organization can look at it and say, we might actually have to increase it for a little while. And that's what we're seeing right now in some companies, especially with the conditions under COVID-19, but also we have a couple of clients that have worked with cost of quality for some time now, and they are actually seeing that when they get into that latest part of stage 3, your cost of quality will go up for a little while, and then it'll come down again. And the reason for that is when you start looking at containing any issues with food safety inside your organization, as opposed to letting it slip outside the walls of your factory, you're getting really good at looking for what could happen. You're getting really good at saying, well, do you know what? We're holding this product all the time, and so I'm wondering if there's something with formulation or the equipment that we're using for that. Can we run some more of that to see what's actually causing that? That could potentially increase your cost of quality, and it's okay because it's going to come down again, because you're getting much better at finding things inside your own organization, and that could actually increase the cost of quality for a little while. A client of ours in Australia, the head of quality there, she's had this discussion with the board of directors and has now been able to position it with them that, you know what, to solve problems, sometimes we have to look really realistic at what we're doing every day, and therefore the cost will go up for a little while, but it'll come down again, and she's shown them that over and over. So I've thrown in some references for you there. Crosby's Quality is Free is a good one, $2 used on Amazon, so have at it. But also the American Society of Quality have some really good material on cost of quality if you are looking at this measure, and I know that a lot of companies are. And we put out a peer-reviewed paper as well, the impact of maturing food safety culture and a pathway to economic gain, and be happy to share some learnings from that as well if you're interested. So just setting the stage a little bit for all of us here to say, Erin is absolutely right, FDA, and we work with a couple of other regulators on the very same point to say, what is the role of the regulator in the topic of food safety culture? And we'll learn much more from FDA, I'm sure, as they get more into the details of what's in that 4th pillar. But those are incentives for change. So is GFSI. You have to, at some point in time, get into being more internally driven for change in your food safety culture. And that's where I'm encouraging you to look at something like cost of quality that can really help you just engage your leadership as well in what does it actually mean for us to be really mature around food safety. So I'm going to just change gears a little bit and share with you a couple of cases as for how some companies have lifted and shifted their company anchors around food safety. The first case is what we call early maturity. The average rating when we went in first was 2.2 on that scale of 1 to 5. And what you see around this wheel are the 5 dimensions to a culture of food safety. Again, Laura's going to talk much more about this, but go to the GFSI, mygfsi.com. You can download the positioning paper for free there that takes you through more detail around these 5 dimensions. The way that the wheel works is that each slice here should have no white space in them if all of your dimensions is at a maturity level stage 5. And in this particular case, we decided that with the company and the team there, let's look at actions in the vision and mission dimension, and let's look at action in the people dimension, and suspected that there will probably be some impact on the consistency because of that. It is a wheel. They're not 5 disparate dimensions. They're not separate. They don't stand alone. They do influence each other, and that's why we thought consistency might go up. So the anchor that we're trying to lift and shift with this first case, when we came back and, or when we were going to come back and do the reassessments, we wanted to see leaders walk the talk because they know and share their unique role in food safety. That's evidence. We can go look for that and we can listen for it. Secondly, leaders take accountability for ongoing food safety rhythm to affect change, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to give you some samples of tactics that can influence a stage 2 company to get to this, these types of anchors. So how we would see these in action and what they did specifically to change it. First one is some tools that were developed with Pepsico, and what you see in the blue side here, they're leaders guides. So they're one pages that a plant leader can take into a weekly plant leader meeting or somewhere else and drive a conversation with her team to say, what are the expectations? Do we know it? And there's some thinking moments at the bottom here for everybody just to have discussions. It's all about leaders education. And then we have these toolkits that you see, the red and the orange one about physical hazards and one about allergens. Now, it's not about necessarily educating people just on what these 2 hazards are, but it's also about these little things at the bottom, which are communication cards. And they have key messages for a supervisor. So I've yet to, I don't know about all of you, but I've yet to find a supervisor that refuses to talk about food safety, but sometimes they just do not have the time to come up with these messages, and we have to help them. And that's what these communication cards are. They explain a little bit about what it is, the key messages, why they're important, and some questions for their teams. So that was one thing to drive the anchor shift. The other one, and the good folks at Kagome give permission to share this, Japanese tomato paste company, and it's all about rhythm and habits. So it's really about saying on a quarterly basis, there's a message from the CEO. On a monthly basis, the leadership team looks at the message and what that means related to performance. There's a weekly message that's conversational pieces for the managers. And then there's these 1-point lessons for supervisors that are daily. And these daily ones are really, I like these, I have to say. I think they're incredibly powerful. And we gave an example or have an example for you here, which is simple about a roll-up door. What should you do? What shouldn't you do? The pictorial, there's very little word on them. But here's the kicker to this. This rhythm is being measured, and it's a key performance indicator for the leadership team to say, are we delivering on what we said for food safety this year? This is a bold step that the CEO asked for. And I think this is a great way to say, yes, you can do all of these assessments to assess your food safety culture, but could you actually also be creative and find something like this where you're measuring whether we actually delivered on this rhythm to create habits around food safety on an ongoing basis? I think it's smart. This is what we saw in the company that applied these types of tactics. Came back, did a remeasure, and their score had gone up 19%, so 2.7, but it took them 16 months. And this is where some of you might be falling off your chairs. You have to embrace that this does take time to create these changes, because we're looking for something that's sustainable. It needs to be there long term. It needs to be, again, go back to the definition and think about it. It's about mindsets and behaviors. And it's not just about your mindset and behavior. It's about maybe you have 1,000 people in your food plant. So now it's that shared mindsets and belief or behaviors in your plant. So it takes time, and that's okay. The other cases are late maturities. In this case, the average maturity score is 3.1. We wanted to create some change with them in the hazard and risk awareness dimension. As you can see, that's the lowest scoring one. And then we wanted to bump the people one as well. And similar to before, we expected there would be some change in the consistency dimension. The 2 anchors that we looked at for this case, food safety behaviors are shared across all levels and roles. I've mentioned this a couple of times now. Secondly, everyone affect food safety risks by participating in the Nearmiss program. That's a much discussed program these days, and I'll give you an example of that. First angle we wanted to shift, we used some of the information that comes out of the 3M Environmental Monitoring Handbook. I was really honored to be asked with Dr. John Butts to write a chapter on driving meaningful change in your organization through culture and environmental monitoring. Environmental monitoring, as we all know on this call, is one of those core programs in our food safety management system, and it's a really good one for engaging leaders in as well. And what you can do if you go in, and you can download this one for free from the 3M website, there's some really good stuff with in the other chapters obviously as well, and it was developed with Cornell University, so go get it and select what you can use in your organization. It's a good free resource. But back to this. So what you see in the table, it's structured around some target behaviors, in this case around environmental monitoring, and then we've introduced some tactics that could be taken to drive towards that behavior. So if we just look at the first dimension, then you'll see it's also the same 5 dimensions that we have in the GFSI decision paper. First behaviors is around leaders of all functions integrate food safety and environmental monitoring messages in their part of the communication with them. So assuming there's a rhythm, environmental monitoring and messages around how we're doing are fantastic for input into your communication with them. So it could be a CEO or a senior leader or plant manager that has a message around, so we haven't found any positives for a long time. Now let's just have a quick look at that and see, are we looking hard enough? Are we challenging our systems? So it could be that there's that kind of messages that are more around how we think and what our mindsets are around environmental monitoring, as opposed to just the hardcore zero findings. There's lots more we can do with our environmental monitoring. The other thing, the other anchor we wanted to shift was around Nearmiss programs. The fine folks in the UK group of Bimbo made the decision to have a food safety Nearmiss program, and it's about engaging others in so that risks for food safety become personal, because the difference between what we do for keeping people safe, and we certainly have learned a lot about that during the COVID crisis, is that when it comes to somebody next to us, so if Laura was hurt and we work on the same line, I would see Laura get hurt, I care about Laura, and I would transpose what she's going through onto myself because I can feel it. It's a little harder with food safety because sometimes those that might get hurt from what we do, they're not standing in front of us. We don't know their faces necessarily. And we don't necessarily have that same connection to food safety risks for that very reason. And Nearmiss program can help you make risks personal, because now we can actually, in these cross-functional groups, we can do the physical walking and we can identify potential issues. We can look at if there is, again, we have to take internal temperatures at a certain point on the line, and at the same time that the person that's supposed to do that has 2 other tasks, and they're trying to be proactive, but they're not really they can't totally cope with what's going on in that part of the on the line where the temperature is taken, but they manage to do it most of the time. If we have this physical walk and we can go and we can have a conversation with people, we can look at that and say that could be a risk, and we probably want to look into what we can change in that particular area. It is built very much on the last pillar there to your left, trust and collaboration. Do not make your Nearmiss program something that the quality and food safety professionals go out and look for near misses, bring them back and report on it. It is another way of policing what we do every day. Put your program in place to say, this is for everybody to learn to see food safety in action and see our hazards and risks every day when they are on the floor, and then actually do something about that. We went back and we remeasured in this company, and we saw an improvement up to a score of 3.4. It took them 18 months. So it takes time, but you know what? I'm going to pass it over to Laura Nelson, who's going to take us on a deep dive on the people dimension.
Thanks, Lone. Thanks for a lot of great information. I love the anchors and lifting those anchors and replacing those. Fantastic. Yeah, I wanted to go over the people dimension, my favorite dimension for a lot of different reasons, and talk to you about what's happening now in people and learning organizations specifically, because we've got some really unique things happening right this moment. And then I'd like to kind of give you a contrast and compare, much like Lone did, but specific to the people dimension. And hopefully you can look at some of the ways and identify where you are perhaps in that maturity model, and identify maybe some areas that you want to work on. So if you go to the next slide, the gosh, are we all tired of hearing we're in unprecedented times? I mean, I don't know how often we hear it. It seems like it's hourly, but it is true. It is true that we are in a very, very unique time, and it has affected our learning organizations. We've seen some very significant pivots. So if you're wondering, gosh, where are we against some of our peers? Are we doing the right thing, or what's going on with other folks as compared to ourselves? I can share with you that many people are pivoting to a more reliance on e-learning versus group-based training. So we definitely, for all the reasons we know, to keep our employees and our staff safe, we're looking at leveraging e-learning, which means in some cases people are embracing technology like they never have before. And so we're seeing that as a kind of an impetus to adopt and embrace technology in order to deliver training in a safe manner. And we are seeing some less training. We monitor millions of training records monthly. We have the opportunity to do that, and typically we just see a continual growth on those training records. In June, we saw about 26% to be exact, less training going on, and that's across the board. Now, maybe that's less documented training, maybe obviously it would be more of a formal training, but that's a pretty significant difference. We haven't seen that in years. And so we surmise that it's just a pause in time as we all struggle to with all the balls that we're juggling now, and to do all the new things we have to do for the pandemic. But that is interesting, and I think it does reflect a little bit on our food safety focus and our food safety culture efforts. We do know that there's been change in content. We run top 10 and top 20 content topics, and not surprisingly, we have more and more people training on COVID-19 protocols and procedures, proper wearing a mask. I know we put out an entire curriculum of library, and that has thousands and thousands of takes. So now we see some of this other training kind of bumping into our normal sanitation, allergen, HACCP training. And obviously for all the reasons we know. We also see an increase in communication. So tools to observe how employees are taking these new protocols and procedures around COVID-19 risk mitigation. And so and it kind of dovetails into the more reinforcement. It's amazing that we see the adoption of more posters, more signage, decals on the floor for separation, all kinds of tools to do very, very fast reinforcement of these new expected behaviors that we have for employees. And we certainly see an increase in HR involvement, so more of a team involvement of this new training to get it out there quickly, and to then verify that it is being adhered to, and that those behaviors that we're training against are being followed and executed. So I mention all of this not to get us into a COVID-19 mindset, but to say that I think there's a lot to be learned on what we have done to engender this new culture of employee wellness, health and wellness, in a very rapid fire manner. And can we take some of those lessons learned and some of the successes that we've had trial by fire almost, and apply that to our efforts in food safety culture? I think the answer is yes, and I think it's worth exploring. All right, so that's kind of what we're seeing at top level. Let's look at learning organization and what is the components of learning organization. So if we go to the next slide, and again, this is pulled from that GFSI white paper. I really encourage you to go to mygfsi.com and really, if you haven't already, download it. I'll reference it several times in this presentation. But it's five definitions here. Employee capability is one, effective training is another, training reinforcement, behavior accountability, and employee empowerment. And I'm going to go over the top, those first three based on our time, but give you some contrasting and comparing. What does a lower maturity look like in these individual topics, and what does a more mature organization? And the goal I have for us is for you to be able to perhaps look at some of these and contrast and say, yeah, I think I'm more mature in this area, probably less mature in training reinforcement, for example. So let's get started. So on employee capability, if we go to the next slide, this is a really important subdimension. But if we look at a more immature culture, we are still seeing this more universal training content. So assuming that everybody needs to know everything. And as adult learners, there is some challenges with that because we really want to know what specifically we need to know per our role. And if we get miscellaneous or extraneous information, we tend to ignore it, but we're not really good at trying to decide what we want to ignore as it doesn't pertain to us, or what we're ignoring and it really does pertain to us. So it's a little bit challenging. So what we find in a more mature culture, for example, is that people have developed training very specific per a job role and job task and functions. So what do they need to know, and provide that information to them very specifically. We also see lack of comprehension as more of an immature, people that rely more on just attendance, for example, classroom attendance, versus actually testing their knowledge of that material and then observing and verifying that they're able to apply that knowledge out on the plant floor. We see people that maybe lack confidence. Maybe they see some examples, or maybe shortcuts that their colleagues use or their supervisors use, and they're not really sure what the right thing to do at any given moment. Clearly, on a more mature culture, we have a higher confidence from those employees. They know exactly what to do, and they're very consistent in doing that. And then we certainly see that in a more immature culture, the formal classroom training is really that all we're going to do. We're going to check that mark and that section, and we're done. Versus taking that knowledge and then going on the plant floor and then looking to see that those, doing those observations, doing those evaluations, and verifying those employees are doing things correctly, that we have the right behaviors being done. And so take a look at that, see where you might fall, and there might be something in there that you want to tackle. If we go to number 2, and we look at sorry, Lone, if you'll go back to one more. It is kind of important, I think. And this, I like this diagram because obviously we want everybody to be in that top left, that high understanding, high confidence. We want people to be able to know exactly what they need to do at any given moment and do it confidently. Those in the red are our problem folks. Those are where our heightened risk are. It's oftentimes maybe some of our more senior people, people that have been there for a long time. They have a high confidence in executing, but maybe they have a wrong understanding of what they need to do at a given moment. Maybe they've seen some shortcuts that have happened that they think, oh, my supervisor did it, so in a similar circumstance, so I can take a shortcut here. We're behind. I don't need to take that temperature right now. The important thing is to get the product out the door, and those shortcuts are happening. So we do need to focus on those folks, and the key there is to identify them and then to engage them, have a conversation with them. So all your employees probably are in some version of this. New employees or those brand new folks, those newbies coming in, they have a very low understanding of the food business, and you're really having to start from beginnings. We rely on training a lot initially. Those that need a little bit more confidence, we need to coach them. We need to mentor them. We need feedback sessions for them. So, okay, now let's go to the next slide. So, effective training, we're seeing people giving training, but is it effective? And it harkens back to what Lone mentioned about measuring, really important. When we look at a little less mature culture, we're typically the QA folks are curating the training. They're kind of isolated in that effort, and they let's face it, QA, QC folks, we're very technical folks. We're going to put together training that's probably at a pretty technical level, typically, and it's going to have all the facts and the figures in there, and it may not be the most compelling learning experience. So what we do see in a more mature culture is people that are more cross-functional teams and involving their employees. We've got some customers that really engage their employees to act as actors, to act out the wrong behavior with the big red X and the right behavior with the big green check mark. And Lone gave an example of that. And gosh, when an employee sees their colleagues up there, it makes a difference that they can identify with what they're seeing, and they internalize that it applies to them. So really a big difference. So I encourage you to explore that if you haven't already. Classroom training only versus more of a blended learning. So on the job, in point of fact, most of the training occurs on the job. It's not in a classroom. So they learn by their colleagues, they learn by their buddies next to them, by their supervisor. And so having that delivered in a consistent environment, and making sure that that they do get experience with hands-on, and they're getting feedback that they're doing the right things, the right behaviors. And then QA responsible for training compliance, where okay, everybody comes in, we're giving hand wash training today on Wednesday, versus employees responsible for training compliance. So in a more mature culture, we're actually putting the responsibility on those employees, saying, hey, for you to be a valued employee here, you need to take these trainings, these courses, and it's up to you. You need to do it within 6 months. And so now it's the onus is on them. It's a responsibility that they then internalize and accept, and they then understand the importance of that training. We work with a customer that actually had that requirement. Okay, within 6 months, you need to have all this training, and if you don't, you won't have access. You'll be closed out of the plant. And so one day she got a call from her CEO, who was actually locked out of the plant, and the downstairs administrator was saying, oh gosh, you need to get down here really quick. She went down there, opened the door. A very perturbed CEO was saying, what is the deal? Why am I locked out of my company? And she said, well, you haven't finished your training. We had a very clear deadline on that. And all of a sudden, she saw a change of that CEO saying, you know what? You're right, that it is important. Everybody has to do it. I get it. And believe it or not, that CEO went home and actually did the training. It's boy, when you have that kind of trust and that kind of transparency, I think that definitely lends itself to a more mature culture. All right, next. So, we can do a lot of training and we can check that box, we can pass audits, but if they aren't doing the behaviors on the floor, then we're really just not that successful. Um, every year for the last 5 years, Alchemy and Camden, along with Cultivate and a number of partners, has conducted a global food safety training survey. We had well over 1,000, gosh, almost 1,500, I think, respondents this year. And unfortunately, we obtained the exact same percentages when we asked the questions. Despite your efforts in employee food safety training, do your employees still not follow your food safety program? And wow, it's still frustrating that we still have a huge amount of folks that are still not following our programs. And so we really do need to understand the need to really verify those behaviors on the floor and look for ways to, on why this is still happening. In this survey, we're still putting together the final white paper. So if you're interested in learning more about this, there's a couple ways to do that. We have another webinar through IAFP on August 17th. So I encourage you to look for more information or contact us if you want to join that. It's a great tool on how to benchmark yourself against your global colleagues, and then understand what people are doing to sort of overcome some of these challenges. All right, next slide. So the final point I wanted to talk about is this importance of training reinforcement. So, this is such a key because it goes beyond that formal classroom training. It's what I like to call the rolling thunder in food safety. So what keeps going on and on after you've done the initial orientation, the initial onboarding? How are you continually reinforcing those food safety protocols and procedures and the importance of food safety in your organization? So, we rely on our supervisors and our managers. We rely on our employees to model food safety behaviors. And if they aren't, then there needs to be some consequences, right? Which is difficult, but that has to be baked into our procedures. And that means everybody. That means top, like my last example, all the way up to the CEO. Everybody needs to be following the protocols and procedures. We can't just rely on that big Saturday where we're having all the training and for annual training, so we now can check that box. It needs to be ongoing small chunks that remind people. And we talk about reinforcement where some organizations are more of a I gotcha kind of supervising level where they're looking for the negatives, and more, which lends itself to that immature culture versus a more mature culture where we're looking for the negatives, but also for the positive behaviors to be addressed. So, giving those attaboys and attagirls where appropriate. The research is very clear that employees embrace feedback, both negative and positive, and it really helps reassure them that they're part of the team, they're doing something important for the organization, and in fact, it leads to a decrease in turnover if they feel like they have a clear understanding of their role in a company. So that's where that mission efforts come from. So, and then going beyond supervisors in corrective actions. We did a study several years ago where we did a baseline training. What did they know? We did formal training, and then we had those same employees go through 3 different observations to kind of align what they were missing and make sure that their behaviors were exactly spot on. So after we did that, we did the experiment, did the research, and then we left. And then we came back and said, well, how are things going after all of the efforts? And surprisingly, what we were finding is it was peer-to-peer corrective actions that were happening now. So imagine you've got now, you're not relying on that supervisor with a clipboard, but instead when new employees come join a line, and those colleagues around them are saying, okay, you're not doing that right. And by the way, we're going to get measured. So here's what you need to do. So now we have this full alignment in those shared beliefs. So very powerful. All right, next slide. You know, one of the key for reinforcement is this forgetting curve, and everybody has seen this. We forget things very quickly. 80% of what we learn is forgotten. A lot of it within 10 days, but certainly within 30 days. And it makes me sad to know that you, all of you out there will be forgetting most of what I've said today. Thankfully, you'll have the slides to refer to. But yeah, so how do you break this into chunks? And I think that's where we can lend ourselves to some of the things we've done very quickly for the pandemic. And some of the signage and some of the reminders that we've given out, and encouragement by supervisors saying, thanks for wearing your mask correctly, or let me help you with that. Gosh, all of those things, those reinforcements are so important, and we can certainly apply that in a bigger way to our food safety culture. All right, next slide. So that really is it for me. So if you need more resources, you can reach out to me. And so I'll turn it over to Lone. Where do we go from here, Lone?
Oops, there we go. Well, I think one of the things that Laura and I talked a lot about in preparation for today is that there's probably some very straightforward, simple steps that everybody can take as we wrap up our webinar. And it's something that you can go do immediately. Do you know what? We've mentioned this a couple of times. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm losing my throat here. Oh, voice. Laura, can you take over here for a second?
I sure can. Yeah, so we did talk about the GFSI food safety culture position paper, and you can go to that reference there, mygfsi.com. But gosh, there's some great addendums, and I know because I had a team of brilliant experts working just on the people dimension, and it covers all the dimensions. But it really allows you to kind of look at and compare your organization with, against in the maturity model, and help you identify where you're strong and where you perhaps are weak. And then we're suggesting that you identify one or more dimension areas, just like Lone has given some examples of from her customers. Where are those anchors you want to lift and reposition and focus on? And I can tell you as a caution, and Lone has cautioned me several times on this, you want to go in a very thoughtful way. You want to be able to focus on something and really put your attention and time and resources to it so that you can move the dial in those particular areas, and then measure that success, or measure that effort, and then continually tweak that. If you try to do too much, it becomes the flavor of the month. Your employees see that, and it's not sustainable. So just make sure you don't bite off too much to chew. And then seek out those best practices that are out there. Lots of research out there now on food safety culture. There's books, there's consultants. So if you're unsure of what tactics to place, you need to improve in an area, but there is help out there. So encourage you to do that. And then certainly leverage your change management experiences. So again, gosh, everybody's really practiced at change management over the last 3 or 4 months. And so, take those nuggets, really kind of look at amazingly. I know on that survey we did, one of the biggest challenges to food safety training is lack of time. Well, we challenged that immediately, and now we've got all kinds of time to train on all new content, right? So So time is there, given the priorities. And so, yeah, look at what we've learned from the culture change we've achieved to address the pandemic, and maybe there's some great experiences you can apply. Definitely measure your results and assess. Keep measuring those results. Be transparent on that. Make sure you have a team of folks that are focused on this change, this improvement that you're wanting to go. And all of this will be great because, as Lone said, GFSI and all of these certifying bodies are including food safety culture improvement plans in their new guidance, and so you'll be nicely prepared and have a nice depth of information you can share with them on your journey on more mature food safety culture. And then after you've reached some success or achieved some success, then repeat.
Rinse and
Lone,
repeat.
what did I miss?
You absolutely nothing, Laura. Absolutely nothing. I'm going to hand it over to Aaron again, but just thank both Laura for agreeing to collaborate on this, and Aaron. I don't know if we have a couple of minutes for questions.
Yeah, we have plenty of questions. They've been coming in, so thank you for everyone for submitting those. We don't have a lot of time. We are 1 minute over. There's just one big one that I think is important to tackle out of the stack of them is this one, and maybe Lone, you can speak to it, and then what we'll do is we'll follow up either with maybe a blog post or something after this, because there's a lot of good questions. The question was, how do you deal with developing a food culture when the turnover rate is high? This person, Mark, was saying the average workforce might be a year with the company for about 150 employees. So people come and go very fast. How do you begin to address that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's something that a lot of companies are either struggling with, or it's just part of the nature of their business. So transitory workforces is a built-in practice in a lot of fresh produce and vegetable and that type of businesses. So I think, Aaron, I would look at it this way. I think you need to look at that there's a small core. There's a small core of people, or core group of people who are with the company and who you really nurture as those that carry the culture with them. You invest in this small core. You, as I said, nurture them. You reward that core group of people for speaking up, for living the values and beliefs that you have around food safety, and you take really good care of them. And then you educate them on their responsibility as role models. So they role model what is expected of everybody through their actions, when they work on the floor, when they are in the warehouse, when they make decisions. They role model every second of the day that they are working with other people who might be a very high turnover or temporary colleague that is not going to be there for long. Because what's important in that situation is that from the minute that a temporary colleague sets foot on your production floor or in your store or in your distribution center, that they see what somebody else is doing and adopt that. So it's back to the shared part of our definition around culture. And then you ask your core group of people to be the buddies for these new people that might not be there but are more temporary colleagues, and you enforce that what you see these core individuals do, act, how their mindsets are. That's what we expect of you as well. I think there's another piece that's really important. When you have a high degree of turnover or your transitory workforce, you have to keep things really, really simple and standardized as much as you possibly can. And I think that's where we can challenge ourselves in food safety and quality, is to say, it's no good to have SOPs that are the foundation for what a temporary person is supposed to do. That's 7 pages long. It might be all written in one language if they're not going to be there for a long time. You strip it down, you make it simple. I go back to the Kagome 1-point lesson around what to do and what not to do with the red and green. Laura mentioned that as well. You simplify. So I would say Who's your core? Are you taking care of your core? And are you also simplifying both your values and beliefs around food safety? So it's great to have a value saying do what's right every day. But for a temporary person, that might actually mean tell your body if you have an idea or if you're not sure about something. Just break it down, make it simple, and then live that consistently through your body system or from that core. Does that make sense, Aaron?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love the idea of just simplification and how well that helps to reinforce and just to get adoption, right? If you'll take one last slide there, if you go one more, I think we'll wrap it up for today. We've got a lot more questions. What we'll do is we're going to get everyone this information following, and we're going to work with either one-on-one, reaching out with some of the folks with other questions. We heard you about the PepsiCo signage. We heard you about some of the other things about what works to encourage employees. We'll follow up. Here's some more resources, SafetyChain.com. Lone, you talked about Maya GFSI, but please go learn more about her organization and also Laura's. But I think we can wrap it up there. This has been fantastic. Lone and Laura, thank you so much for joining Beyond Compliance. It's been a pleasure of mine, and I appreciate everyone's time and patience as we kind of work through this heady material. Go forth, get safe, and be well. Thank you all. This ends today's Beyond Compliance.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.